Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to be talking about a horror story from the 1880s by one of the most famous writers around, and that is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, of course, when I think about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I'm sure when a lot of people do, the first thing they think of is Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes, of course, was wildly popular, and Arthur Conan Doyle had kind of an interesting relationship with his main character. I think he kind of tired of him after a while, but the public wanted Sherlock Holmes so bad that he was kind of forced to continuously write these Sherlock Holmes stories. But he actually wrote in many genres, which I didn't really know, and one of them is horror. And I discovered this through this anthology, just this old beat-up 70s, I would guess, anthology. Yeah, it looks like this was first published in 1967. It's called Horror Times 10, and in it there is a short story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle called The Captain of the Pole Star, and Sam Moskowitz does all of the introductions to these stories. And I'd just like to read really quick his introduction to this story in this anthology. A. Conan Doyle was eventually to become exceedingly unhappy about the popularity of Sherlock Holmes because it seemed to type him as limited to the detective story. Actually, few writers wrote such a diversity of fiction with such competence. Whether it was a historical work, science fiction, a supernatural tale, a sports story, or an African adventure, Doyle could tell it well. The Captain of the Pole Star was written during the period of Doyle's unsuccessful medical practice in the 1880s, before he ever wrote a Sherlock Holmes story. It was based on his experience in 1880 aboard the whaler Hope, on which he served as ship's surgeon before completing his medical education. The vessel had sailed to the Arctic, and the region made a vivid impression upon Doyle. The Captain of the Pole Star was the title story of an exceptionally popular collection of A. Conan Doyle stories published in 1894. It is a unique masterpiece of terror, for though it builds towards its utterly strange climax with consummate craftsmanship, the style is so flowing as to be almost light, and the author avoids melodrama with real artistry. Yes, so here is my copy of The Captain of the Pole Star and Other Stories. And this, I believe, is a first American edition of this particular title. So it's not a first edition, it's a first American edition. There's a lot of interesting story titles in the contents. The one that is most interesting to me that I'll probably read in the future for this channel is one called That Little Square Box. But anyway, the first story in this is The Captain of the Pole Star, which we're going to be talking about today. And as Sam Moskowitz so eloquently wrote it, it's about a whaling ship that is in the Arctic trying to hunt whales. Its captain, the captain's name is going to be hard for me to say, but I believe he's Captain Craigie. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but we'll just call him the captain from now on. Is a seasoned captain, has gone on many whale hunts, and the narrator of the story is the doctor on the ship. We'll just call him the narrator. He does have a name, but I can't remember it right off the top of my head. And it's the story of them at the end of their season. It's time for them to go back. Unfortunately, they are trapped between two ice sheets. This is really terrifying stuff. And one of the things that I'll say about this story right now is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle does an incredible job of explaining kind of how terrifying this would be, because they are in between two ice sheets, and there's this like road, basically, this area that is unfrozen that they can go back out of the Arctic for. But the captain is being super weird and isn't ready to go. And he keeps telling the crew that he's seen like a bunch of whales and he knows there's a bunch, and their season has been kind of a failure, and they're all hoping to get back home to do other ventures, other fishing, but the captain keeps talking about they're not able to go, and the people are starting to doubt the captain, and it hasn't got to the point of mutiny, but it's getting a little bit nerve-wracking, and the captain really seems to respect the doctor, so our doctor, the narrator of the story, decides he's going to go talk to the captain and figure out what's going on. And what it's come down to is the direction that the wind comes from. So if the wind comes from a certain direction, the ice is going to seal around the boat and they will be stuck there and die. If it comes from another direction, then it will melt some of the ice and they'll be able to get back. So they are waiting to see what direction the wind is coming from. I can't imagine how nerve-wracking that would be. They all want to turn around and go, but the captain's like, no, it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll blow from the right direction. And they are sitting ducks. It's really, really wild. And as a few days pass, not many, the ice starts to close in around them, and people are starting to give up hope. And they all start seeing this apparition on the ice. And our narrator is like a doctor, very logical, and is like, they're not seeing anything. They're superstitious, and all that they are seeing is maybe bears. Sometimes bears stand up when they're alert. And that's what they're seeing, as this tall white figure out among the ice sheets. And he doesn't believe any of it. But he watches the captain, and the captain is continuously obsessed with looking out of the boat onto the ice sheets, and is constantly just staring out onto the ice sheets. And he slowly reveals to our narrator, the captain does, that he is seeing something out there. Eventually, we learn, just by the narrator going into the cabin of the captain, that he's probably looking for the ghost of a woman that he knew, and we don't know what the connection is, because all he sees is a watercolor painting of this woman in the captain's quarters, and Doyle describes it absolutely beautifully. So we get this sense that maybe the captain has lost this woman and is looking for her out on the ice, and eventually our narrator starts seeing the apparition himself. I think he sees it once. And of course, this completely goes against all the logic that he'd been using before, and he has to admit that there is something supernatural and strange going on. Do I recommend this book? I'm going to stop there for the plot synopsis. I do. This is a really good read. First off, the prose is absolutely incredible. It's written in the 1800s, so you might kind of have some bumps as you read it, but really not many. It reads very well. And of course, I feel like very important in the history of horror, because it's before weird fiction really, or weird tales type stuff really takes off. And there's an interesting thread of the Arctic region and weird tales. Of course, Lovecraft eventually writing At the Mountains of Madness, and the terrifying discoveries that the expedition finds under the ice. You also have The Thing. So yeah, there's a huge tradition of this concept of the terrifying Arctic. And I'd even say that it harkens back, like the first thing that I can think of that discusses this, and I know this isn't the first, but it's the first that I know, is Frankenstein. It opens in the Arctic, and I think closes in the Arctic as well, if I remember correctly. It's been a few years since my last reread of Frankenstein. Yeah, so I do think you should read it. It's fun. If you love Arctic stuff, it's fun. If you love ghost stories, it's fun. Okay, from here on out, there's going to be spoilers. It's a pretty quick read. In this, it was like 20 pages, so it reads pretty quick. It could be on Horror Babble. I don't know. I'm sure that somebody's read it, so you can listen to it that way as well. So eventually, the captain is haunted and runs out into the night following something that nobody else can really see. They search for him and search for him, and they find him frozen at the end of one of the ice sheets. It's just a really straightforward ghost story. We eventually learn that I think the captain was engaged to this woman, and she was somehow either killed brutally or died painfully. It doesn't really say in the story itself, but he lost her and was haunted by her and eventually ran out and froze to death to be with her. So it's kind of beautiful. It's really kind of a love story / ghost story. Although you never get the sense that of any of that. It's just the thing that is haunting him that the other crew sees every once in a while is never given any agency. It's just something he's following. So it feels like he's just kind of chasing an image. When this started in the Arctic, I was really excited just because I love these kind of isolated Arctic ghost stories. It's a really incredible idea. You know, you have Frankenstein chasing his monster all the way to literally the ends of the earth. You have H.P. Lovecraft writing about frozen creatures way below the ice, and then John W. Campbell doing a similar thing later with Who Goes There. I was very excited for that. But I was surprised to find that the horror story the setting was not as important. Of course, if he just followed the ghost around, but he was in England, he'd just be following the ghost around fine. So I think that Doyle needed to put this somewhere where following the ghost meant he would die, and that's why we get the Arctic setting. And the Arctic setting, in my opinion, is the best part of this story. It's the most fun, and as Moskowitz pointed out, he was writing from experience, having been on a whaling ship himself. But it doesn't connect strongly to the horror story. It didn't have to be the Arctic. It could have been in a desert. He chose the Arctic, and I feel like it just almost doesn't connect as much as I would have liked it to. But it's still an amazing horror story, and one that I think you guys would really enjoy. All right, that's it for The Captain of the Pole Star by Doyle. I think I'm going to read some more of these short stories just to see what else he did, because I like the idea of Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who created Sherlock Holmes, doing horror is super exciting. Also, I'm going to read a couple more stories in this anthology. I'm going to read next His Unconquerable Enemy by W.C. Morrow. I have already done a W.C. Morrow story on this channel called Over a Bottle of Absinthe or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but it's here on the channel if you want to go back and look at it. But this one, His Unconquerable Enemy, is a weird tale that he is most known for. So it's the one that's most anthologized. So I want to give that a read and see what I think of that. So you can expect those in the future. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support our channel, go check out our Patreon. I put up extra content over there. I think there's about 10 or 11 videos up there now. It's pretty new. We also have a Discord that's pretty lively, so if you'd like to become a part of the Discord, go on over to Patreon and check that out, and it helps me continue to make these videos. All right, thank you so much for watching.